Is this abusive? I'm ending my relationship of 13 years. I'm 34F. My spouse is 44M. We met when I was 21. I don't even know where to start. I'm ending my relationship of 13 years. We've been living together since 2012. We got married in 2019. I finally saw how awful he was treating me, and I think the relationship was unhealthy, bordering on abusive. We met online and initiated a long distance relationship from 201 12012. I was in college, he was serving in the military. I rented an apartment when I graduated, and I applied to college programs near me on his behalf so he could use his GI Bill. He moved in, was accepted to school. For 4 years, he received a hefty living stipend because of the GI Bill. During this time, I got a job as a recruiting assistant and we stopped having sex or any physical intimacy 7 years ago. I told him this was a big missing piece for me, and he had lots of reasons. I'm not interested. I'm too tired. I don't like sex and it never felt good. My medication is making it hard to maintain an erection. 2015 was the last time we had sex. Otherwise, I was pretty happy in our relationship. We shared a lot of common interests, including spirituality, video games, esoteric stuff, etc. We laughed a lot and had a ton of fun. I told myself I didn't care about the sex, but in hindsight, I was suppressing a lot of needs and desires in order to make my relationship work. 2020 is where it started going off the rails, I think. I had an opportunity to take a promotion. If I accepted the promotion, I would need to move 900 miles to Florida. My husband has always been an advocate of my career and was supportive. We deliberated for a long time because it meant he would need to leave his low paying job of 30 twalk/YR. He disliked the job he was in, but was really just trying to stick it out because he would get a pension at the 5-year mark. My earning potential was much greater than his because I'd found early success in my career. After doing the math, we decided to make the jump. So we moved to Florida in Feb 2020. I increased my income from 75 ek to 90 twak with the promotion. The day we landed in Florida, everything shut down for COVID. I also learned that we lost a key client, so my employment would be ending in 6 months. He found a job with the state of Florida 2 months after he arrived, low paying, earning 28K/YR. I busted my ass to find another job. Somehow I found one and managed to increase income through the job change from 9012 to 125K. During this time, I fell into a very deep depression and started experiencing suicidal thoughts for the first time ever. I missed my friends and family and felt totally isolated. He suggested we move home. I felt so guilty about him having to leave another stable job for me, but he said it was fine. He'd always wanted to have a business running paid Dungeons and Dragons games online, and I encouraged him to do this because it was his long-time dream. We didn't need his income, and this was a job he could pick up and take with him. We did the math again, and he created a plan that he thought would earn him around 25K a year. But after a few months, we both decided it was too much. This is where it starts to go south, I think. We moved back home, eventually bought an amazing condo on the river. We used his 0% down VA loan to do this. We put a 40K down payment down, which I had saved on my own over 4 years. After we bought the house, the weight of the financial responsibility took its toll on me. After moving home, I was promoted again, this time bringing my single income to over 200K total comp. His income was irrelevant at this point, and his business started to slow down to where he was maybe contributing 10K annually from his games, plus his 400/mo disability payment from the VA. While his income declined, he became less and less motivated to do anything. He would wake at 10, walk the dogs, go back to sleep, or lounge on the couch the entire day while I worked. He barely lifted a finger, and our home began to look like a crack house because of how dirty/messy/cluttered it was. He wasn't caring for the house, wasn't cooking. We ordered food out every night and spent close to 35 pounds on food in 12 months. 35. I started to break down at this point and started begging him to contribute more. The stress of my career was extreme, and there were days I was working 12 hours. I am by nature dramatic, ambitious, and extroverted. I started to resent him, and I told him so, that I was worried about our relationship and that I was very unhappy. We talked about this a few times, and he said I didn't love him and only valued him for what he could contribute. This gutted me. The idea of me being someone who only valued someone for their money. For lunch, he would make me eggs every day, and for dinner, a hamburger. Before this, he tried other dishes. He would make 3 days' worth of chili, canned tomatoes, black beans, salsa, ground beef, in a crock pot for us to eat for lunch and dinner every day. He did the same thing with beef and potato stew. I told him I didn't like the chili for 3 days in a row because it gave me diarrhea, and that the beef was too tough after 2 days. He started making hamburgers for dinner every day, and when I asked for variety, he told me he couldn't give me any variety because I was too picky, even though I shared recipes we would like. He said these would take him too much time. So for a year, we ate hamburgers every night. In March 2023, I asked him to go to a music festival with me to see my all-time favorite band. He came with me to the festival. The band was playing at 9 p.m. on Friday night. We got there around 3 p.m. to shop, eat, see other acts. At about 4:30 p.m., it started pouring and the music was put on hold. He started yelling at me about how bored he was, and why would I ever ask him to go to an event hours before the main act. I told him I just wanted to hear the music, and then he felt bad and bought me a cozy sweatshirt with my own money to make up for how much he upset me. Fast forward to the following evening. After the festival, I had made arrangements to meet up with some friends I met while gaming last summer. We went to dinner. As the check came, my husband asked if we were going back to the hotel. I said yes, but then my friend invited us back to his house. I turned to my husband and asked if we could go. On the way over to my friend's house, he berated me for 20 minutes about how I'd bait and switched him and how selfish I was for changing the plan after he had already set his mind towards returning to the hotel. Inside my friend's house, he was charming and engaging, and everyone loved him. They asked why I was so upset. I couldn't explain. I thought it was wrong of me to change the plan on him, so I accepted his behavior. The next morning, I told him how much he hurt me with his words and how scared I get when he berates me. He said he isn't berating me, just the situation, and that I should just let him vent because it's not good for him to keep it inside. I said okay, I'd try to manage it differently next time so as not to catch him off guard. Since then, things have gotten progressively worse. He stopped showering for days at a time, barely left the couch. So I asked him to look for a job at least 3 times because I didn't feel he was contributing. He told me my expectations were too high and that he was contributing plenty and pointed out all the things he did. They included these and only these: walking the dogs in the morning and afternoon, ordering groceries from Instacart, taking out the trash once a week, cooking me eggs for lunch most days, cooking a burger for dinner. When needed, he would go to the store and pick up prescriptions. 3 to 4 times a week, he would run a paid D&D game. 3 to 4 times a game, he would sleep, lounge, or play video games. The last 2 times we've talked about going back to work, he said that I had created the situation that we're in by relocating, that I have taken everything from him, referring to the jobs he'd left, and that I was asking for too much of him. Last weekend, our terminally ill dog, he has lymphoma, got very sick. I was out and he texted me that Lance threw up. I asked him to watch him. When I got home, I asked if Lance had drunk any water. He said, obviously he drank water because he threw up. If he didn't drink water, there would be nothing to throw up. That night at 2 a.m., Lance continued throwing up, had diarrhea all over me, the floor, himself. I woke my husband up to tell him. He said, "Okay, are you handling it?" and went back to sleep. I showered, gave the dog a bath, and cleaned the floor and went to bed. Lance was barely moving the next morning when I woke at 8. Ma'am, so I woke my husband again to tell him I was taking Lance to the emergency vet. I asked him to come. He rolled over. I reminded him that he made me go to the emergency vet for a previous terminally ill dog alone, and that he promised her would never leave me alone at the emergency vet again with a terminally ill pet. He looked at me and said, "I'm going back to sleep." That was the last straw. I took Lance to the vet, went home, packed a bag, got my other not sick dog and my work essentials, and told him I needed time to figure out what I wanted to do, that I felt unsupported, that I was unhappy. I left for my parents. The vet called the next day. Lance got gotten into chocolate, and that's the reason he was so ill. I shared the news with my husband. The next day, our other non-sick dog was really not adjusting well to the change of location, so I asked my husband to keep him at the house with him. My husband picked up the dog and then texted me that this dog had now also gotten into the same bag of chocolate, and he didn't realize. The dog was going to go for it. I decided that night I likely wanted a divorce because I couldn't handle his lack of responsibility any longer. But first, I wanted to try to have one more conversation to see if we could fix this. We went to lunch yesterday and I outlined for him what I needed him to do in order for this relationship to. I told him he needs to take care of his mental health. He needs to really own managing the house and food like it is his job or go to work because I can't stand seeing him lounge all day while I bust my ass to cover all the bills and financially support him. He responded by telling me again that this situation is all my fault. I created it. I'd taken everything from him. And then the final dagger: "You got fat and I don't want to fuck you," alluding to our lack of a sex life being my fault. So I am getting divorced finally. I've had this nagging in my stomach I've been trying to ignore for 5 years. I've been having panic attacks trying to ignore it, I think. I never thought I was going to be able to leave. I was trapped in my own mind and too scared, but I've done it at last. I needed to write this to process, but upon reflection, it seems like I may have been stuck in a cycle of guilt and abuse. Story 2. My boyfriend, 28M, and I, 30F, have been together for a year. Is it worth repairing the relationship if my boyfriend is low effort and I plan the dates most of the time? We get along well. There are flaws sometimes and arguments, but nothing that lasts longer than 5 minutes. Otherwise, I'm a really relaxed person and am not into pompous events. But I thought it would be nice to celebrate the first anniversary of the relationship. I mentioned that to him and he agreed with it. We talked about it about 15 days in advance a couple of times, and I mentioned a couple of ideas where we could, except none of the ideas really impressed him, but that was fine with me. A nice dinner was also enough for me. I thought that maybe he would come up with an idea also. The day before the anniversary, we talked, and through the conversation, I realized that he had absolutely nothing planned or booked a restaurant, and he expected me to do it, which I did. I found the restaurant where we were going. On anniversary day, he was late, i.e., he picked me up very late. I know he works a lot, but I work just as much. So I've hardly found another restaurant that is open that late. In the empty restaurant, he told me that he wasn't hungry at all because he ate a huge burger 2 hours before we had an appointment. I ate alone and cried. I was so disappointed. Not to mention, I didn't get a single little flower. I prepared a very sentimental and personalized gift for him that I didn't give him at the end. I really didn't expect more than chocolate or flowers. Then I would have been the happiest in the world. Well, he comforted and calmed me while I was eating and crying in the middle of the restaurant. He said in one moment that he felt guilty, that he was very sorry, and that he would make things right next year. But he also said that he doesn't understand my drama and so much sadness, because I should actually be grateful that we are simply together at all and that we are sitting together, because that is the most important thing. And we need to appreciate small things. That I should smile and be happy. I feel unappreciated and miserable and stupid. I must mention that during our entire relationship, he rarely plans things, but he will gladly go along with everything I plan. He knows that it bothers me, and I asked him several times to plan something and surprise me sometime. Otherwise, he is very bright and intelligent, and we communicate openly, and he listens to me well when I have a problem. But in this situation, I have the feeling that he doesn't understand absolutely anything. What I'm saying, fast forward, at the end of the dinner, when I ate my lasagna, I asked him to take me home, and that I didn't want him to sleep at my place, and that I want to be alone. He was quite offended by that. I left without saying goodbye, and we haven't heard from each other since. One day has passed since then. I really am not sure how to proceed with this relationship, how to work on it, and is it even worth it? Please advice. Story 3, Insanity Come with Parenthood. No one tells you this stuff. Or maybe they do and we don't believe it. There are many reasons that parents start pulling their hair, howling at the moon, and quietly crying in corners to themselves. The main reason is because we are silently, easily, unstoppably sliding into something called PI, parenthood insanity. Often, this PI is caused by our children, someone else's children, or just children in general. Oh, sure. Kids are wonderful things. The future of the human race depends on them after all. Yes, it's a bit scary, but it's always been that way. That said, they will still push you ever more slowly toward the edge of running away. Here are just a few examples from a single day. Example 1. One recent week, we did the holiday barbecue thing. The day was beautiful, the barbecue was smoking, the drinks were on ice. It was going to be an easy, wonderful afternoon. We slept in then and slowly started getting everything ready. The barbecue was fired up, steaks and boca burgers were tossed on the grill. The boca burgers were tossed on the grill. The boca burgers were for the vegetarians among us. Yes, mostly me. My mother came over and the day looked sublime. You know that's not going to last, right? While we were eating, my son Ryan casually mentioned that he needed to get a haircut before leaving for Fire Academy. Aren't you leaving at 7 a.m. tomorrow? It's Easter Sunday. I know. Where will you get this haircut? What do you mean? Sigh. Do you really think there are many places open for a haircut today? The blood started draining out of the poor kid's face. There aren't? He asked. I just shook my head and assumed the exasperated dad pose, leaning back in the chair, hands clasped behind the head, quizzical look on face. He started to panic. I couldn't let that go on too long. I'm not cruel after all. I told him to start looking to see if he could find some place open that might cut his hair. He started frantically going through websites, and he finally found one open place, salon on 30th, and called. They told him if he came right then and gave a credit card number to hold the spot, they'd cut his hair. So he gave the credit card number and we jumped in the car and took off for North Park, quite a distance away from the house, but he had no choice. It was the only place he could find. Why did I go along? What? Miss this play out? Not likely. Example 2. He was getting directions from the phone, and a SDPD officer saw that and pulled us over. Ryan told him he was just getting directions to go to the only place he could find to get a haircut because he had Fire Academy to go to, and the phone was not on his face. The officer let him know that hands-free means fully hands-free. Ryan knows this, of course. The officer let him off with a warning, and Ryan started breathing again. We got back on the road and barely made it to the place by the 4:15 appointment time. But barely made it equals made it. And whew, Neither of us had been to this particular salon before. The decor had a made over warehouse vibe, because it really was a made over old warehouse or business of some kind. The people there were friendly, but not overly so. In other words, professional. They got him in right away, and I started writing this column on my phone while waiting. They offered me a beer and started naming the brands. I stopped them at Pacifico. Why go beyond that? Can a Pacifico help one write a column? I have no idea, but it probably can't hurt. And it certainly makes a breezy afternoon in Old Park go by as one waits for their kid to get a haircut. Example 3. And then came the price. Ryan got his first $60 haircut on Easter Sunday. His haircuts are usually about half that price. His eyes started to pop out of his head when he heard the price, but I told him no worries, I got it. He was stressing enough as it was. No sense adding to it. Have to say that I rather liked the place. Interesting decor, and they offered me a Pacifico while I waited. Plus, he did get a really good haircut. It wasn't cheap, but it was definitely worth it. So, good haircut. That pop paid for, and he didn't get a ticket. He had a pretty good afternoon. I had to ask why he waited until Easter Sunday to get a haircut. A dad question. And he allowed that wasn't the best of ideas. I couldn't agree more. I wrote a column a few years ago about how tough parenting can sometimes be. Many of you connected with that particular column. In it, I discussed how I got to thinking about being a parent. Of course, this is usually the kind of thing you only think about late at night, when you can't get to sleep. And so it was with me then and now. There are all kinds of parents. Easy ones, tough ones, taskmasters, fun ones, boring ones, and every kind in between. I began to wonder about just what kind of parent I am. Am I mean? No. Am I tough? No. Am I fun to be with? Well, occasionally. Personally, I like to think that I'm a riot of fun to be with, 24/7. But there are people around who might argue with that, so I'll let it go. For now. Most parents try to do a halfway decent job. At least we try to. But doing even a halfway decent job can be downright difficult, at times nearly impossible. And that's to be expected, of course, since most of us are in the middle of parenthood insanity.